anxiety is so easily treated. It's more easily treated than the common cold.
This is literally me every day. That don't worry, you're going to do great. Nothing is going to happen. It's not dangerous. Don't worry. Don't worry.
What's the role of medication? Is that important? What percentage of kids respond to it?
Welcome to the Learning Curve podcast, brought to you by Mishpacha magazine.
We are raising children in a changing and challenging world.
So let's tackle the important issues facing from families today.
I am Rabbi Garfield, Menal of Yeshiva Teres Emes in Houston, and I love talking about chinuch.
I am Rabbi Schonfeld, Menahel Yeshiva Katana of Manhattan, Beis Tipra of Manhattan, and director of Camp Aish. I also love talking chinuch and sometimes fishing.
Join us as we answer your questions and discuss the topics that matter to parents the most.
Welcome back to another episode of The Learning Curve. As I am your co-host, Ari Schonfeld. Rabbi Garfield is your co-host. That's the word co. From Houston, Texas. And as the weather gets warmer and the spring season is here, you speak differently. You sound, I know I do. The weather gets warmer. There's just a certain, what can I say, pep in our step. An energy, a pep in our step. And in Houston, it's warm the whole year.
Maybe the word spring comes from that, right? A spring in your step.
You had snow this year, didn't you?
We did. It was very exciting. Very
yeah,
exciting.
I wonder,
like an inch
you
and a half.
canceled school?
Oh, well, we had, I have to remember. Yeah, we did actually. We did the morning of the snow where it was actually like, lots of inches we did. And then the next day we did, I think, just some partial stuff. It
like
took some
Yerushalayim,
time.
when it snows, you have to you have nothing to shovel the snow with.
Yeah, like no one had any defenses.
All right, but
We
the snow,
survived.
Baruch Hashem, it's gone. We are deep into the second season of the Learning Curve. Our questions have been coming in fast and furious. Baruch Hashem, questions today were sent in always anonymously. Don't worry, we have your back. And away we go.
A principal actually shared with me some great story from our podcast. I'll just share it. I had told her to call in and we could play it, but I don't think we got the recording. But basically, a principal was dealing with a student who she was worried was going to be a bully of a younger grade. And she heard our podcast and the story that you shared from a manal around the country who used the technique of going to the potential bully and empowering them and being mechazik them to be leaders. So she went to the potential bully and said, we need you to be the head student. She made up this new classification called head student. You're going to be the head student, and I need you in the job of head student to set a tone in the classroom. And that it worked. She was telling me that thanks to your story, she did it and it transformed the class.
I read the story that she sent us, Rabbi. She added a piece that I think was the coolest shtickle, and that is, it was a day, I think, that the teacher was absent. So there was like a sub. So typical, when you have a tough kid, you tell the kid to stay home. So they were thinking of keeping the kid home. And instead, she's like, listen, now that the teacher's absent, so we need another assistant in the class. A brilliant move by probably a brilliant educator.
I would only imagine.
Yes. And here we go. All right. Who goes first today? I think I'm asking you.
Yeah, it sure looks like that to me.
Question for Rabbi Garfield. Dear TLC, my kid came home laughing hysterically. Ma, we played the best prank on the substitute. My daughter proceeds to tell me with glee what happened. I can only imagine. I can't even relate to me. I can't relate to everything they're doing. Anyways, my daughter proceeds to tell me with glee what happened. I wanted to tell her off and tell her how horrible it was what she did. But I also was so happy that she shared it with me. In general, I like this question. How do we balance having that open relationship and having our kids be eager to share, at the same time having them hear from us when their actions are inappropriate? Like, this mother is afraid if she does what I think our reaction would be, are you crazy, chutzpah? Then she'll never share anything. Right. How do you balance wanting your children to share without shutting them out, but also educating them and teaching them and role modeling for them?
Great question. Of course, like everything, it's not a very simple answer, but in this specific case, my approach, I guess, is two parts. One is, I would say, generally, I think it's good that the child feel comfortable talking to you, but I guess it depends how serious the prank is. I'm assuming that it's a prank that's not horrific. I mean, we
Well, I
beat
would
up
hope
the
it was
teacher.
horrific. I would hope if it's horrific, she would get in trouble in school unless no one knew, right? Then it's if it's serious.
Right,
Right.
like,
Let's stay
I'm
away
assuming
from
that it's,
the right. Let's
you
stay away from
know
the we put a bomb. I don't know. We
yeah.
started a fire. Right. Okay.
But I would think that in the moment, chinuch doesn't have to be done in 1 minute. So my gut is to say that in the moment, um, you shouldn't react too strong and let the child sort of like get it out and maybe ask a few clarifying questions, but more out of curiosity than a judgment. And depending on the emotion of the child, I would sort of leave it there and then come back to it maybe a week later, 3 days later, depending on when things have calmed down a little, and say, by the way, I was wondering, that prank. I thought about it. Although it was a great cop, I wonder if you thought about how the teacher would have felt, or I wonder if like that kind of thing, and like bring it up later. But in the moment, it might be not worth it. Like, what do you gain? Let's put it this way: what do you gain by reacting in the moment? Now, if God
I
forbid you
want my child
disappear.
to know that I want my child to know
Right,
that
because
that's
then you're worried the
unacceptable.
next 3 to 5 days, an opportunity might come up and they wouldn't know, and then they're gonna do it again?
Yeah, they're gonna go back to school the next day and they go, oh my God, right. I mean,
Yeah,
right.
maybe. Probably not. Probably statistically, you have 3 to 5 days.
Do you have data on that? Do you have like maybe your one of your focus groups that
I
you have
haven't
has
done
data?
data, but I do have a few years of common sense, which would dictate that you usually have a few days at least to, get a message like that across, especially if that's what it takes. Because the alternative is to react right away, and then the message you give will not go at all. It will just be on deaf ears. So your option is either to react right away and deaf ears, but then you could sleep at night feeling you did something, even though those of us who know you didn't. And I guess since you're listening to this podcast, now you know that you didn't, so the whole thing is ruined for you. So that's option A. Option B is to react mildly. I wouldn't say, yeah, like, you don't have to reinforce the negativity, but somewhat like, oh, interesting, like that, just calm. And then later, 3 to 5 days later, or longer or less, depending on, when you could feel that there's emotional separation. Also for you, by the way, that you're not like worked up about it. Um, bring it up and say, I was thinking, as if your child's not crazy for not realizing how ridiculous it was. You're not saying, I can't believe you did that. You're saying, I was thinking, how do you
Yeah.
think, whatever the thing, how do you think that worked? Or how would you feel? Or some kind of reflective question.
There's a story. If you remember it, then you'll maybe fine tune it for me. That Dr. Twersky says that when he was a kid, he was playing chess. You remember the story?
I
On Rosh
sure do.
Hashanah. On Rosh
Yeah.
Hashanah, right? And his father didn't say anything. He just looked at him. Maybe he said it like with like disappointment. Chess on Rosh Hashanah. Chess on Rosh Hashanah. And then afterwards, his father pulled him over and said, "Did you win?" Right?
Yeah.
So I think that the perfect balance. I think that we and I'm part of the we. So I'm talking to myself. "Retzu sich allein." We are so afraid of losing our I don't know what with our children. Our children are complex. They can hear both. Don't be so afraid to laugh. Like you have this fear that if I laugh at my daughter's prank, my son's shtick in yeshiva, and I let him share his excitement with me, then he's gonna blow up the school, right? And call in a prank to the police station.
Do you have statistics on that?
We can tanza beide chasanas. Why can't we do both?
I think a lot of it has to do with the relationship you had with your kid going into this environment. If you're talking about, we're both talking in scenarios where you have the ability to have normal conversations with children, with teenagers.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is new. I think that in the previous generations, the idea of having complex, layered conversations
Right.
with children was not really looked at. I disciplined a kid in my yeshiva recently. I made him apologize to a teacher that he felt he should not have had to apologize for. And I was pretty tough on him, and he was
I'm not
very
a
upset
big
with me.
forced apology guy. We'll
But
leave that for another
the
time.
reason why I did it was because the teacher demanded it, and I decided to support my teacher. So and he didn't want to, and it was basically a forced apology, and he was very upset. And I called him into my office the next day, and I said to him, "I'm gonna be even as Manal." I said this, I'm gonna bring you under the hood a little bit, Yankee. I'm gonna be a little vulnerable with you." And I said, I didn't say I'm sorry, but I explained to him why I did it. As a yachid, as a rabbi, I know you. And I explained to him why it was not necessarily the right thing to do. I said, I think it was. I'm not sure. I understand that, and it took away the entire sting because I wasn't there to impose power. I explained to him why I made the move I made. I saw he was upset. I understood it. I said, you might be right. I might be wrong. I have to make these decisions. I think most of the time, I hope I'm right. And I didn't think I lost him. I thought I gained him. I thought I
Yeah.
gained in that relationship. And I think that's a knetch of a
Yeah, I mean, it's
new-ish.
not using authoritarian power, and I think it's more of a time of a sign of the times that the world doesn't react to that kind of stuff like it did back in the day. Like in general. I think some people would say you're being soft or you're being whatever, but the reality is certainly those of us who live this know that you get much further today with a sweetness and with a chain and with an engagement and with a strength and a hard line. I mean, Gedolim have said this, that we have to switch to sweet from the sour.
I wrote my Rebbeim before Purim this year, a nice card for my Rebbeim. Maybe I slipped in a little bit, a bill or two.
Nice.
And one of the Rebbeim wrote back to me, thank you for the card. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for the kind words. We're just like children. We need chizuk too.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
So I can relate to that. We had a thing last Purim, I'm remembering now. We had some of the kids did a shtick that was a little over the line. I'm all. And we took it down and they were upset. And I said, listen, maybe it was wrong. I don't know.
The kids were upset.
The kids were upset because they put all this
Right.
energy into the shtick and it was taken down before they could
Could I
be
know what the shtick was so I can paskin or no?
Yeah, they emptied a bunch of the rooms in a wing and they put a pool in there with water and fish. Live, well, somewhat live, some dead. Fish and one of the administrator called what we're going to do the next day. And if you knew the setup, it would have been a lot of girls in a little space and water. It wouldn't have ended well for the pool, the fish, or the school, the learning. So we went in there like 10:30 at night. A bunch of
Any chachma or what in it, or just on fish?
yeah, pretty much as well. They
Like
they
last
other. It was a whole water other fish.
last year, my boys put in my room a pool with fish and fishing rods. I mean,
You're
come on.
Mr. Fish, right?
Yeah, that was,
That wouldn't disturb the learning. This was like it would have really messed up the learning. Like just to
So
get it back together.
without telling them, you
Right, we
took
went
it
in at
around?
night. Someone tipped us off.
Wow.
We went in at 10:30 at night. Totally got rid of every shemetz
Without the boys
without,
knowing or the
and
girls
they
knowing?
came in the next day and it was gone. And they were like they lost their mind.
This was the boys or the girls?
Girls.
So that's why they were angry. You pulled a power trip on them because you didn't tell them.
Right, right. Well,
That's the
we couldn't
right?
wait at night, but like bottom line is I said, listen, maybe what we did was wrong. I'm okay with that. I actually what I did was they said we spent money. I said, you know what, I will credit the money you spent to your graduation trip on me. Like I'm not here to fight with you. It was a hard call. It was a little over the line with the water and what was going to happen with the pool. The pool had a hole in it, so like we had to deal with that. It was they realized. I think they realized. But my point is,
Yeah, I think next year before Purim, we're gonna have a podcast about other shtick. I'm as sticky as I am, and I'm not an other shtick person in the school building. I think it's just precast old, but I lose. But I sound like such a neb when I say that.
but anyway, so my point is just to say that by saying to them, like you're saying, that's really the point. By saying to them, I might have been wrong, and it's sincere. I'm not sure. It was a hard call. Like I felt conflicted about it.
And I
They
imagine
respected that.
and it took away the whole
Yeah, it was like, guys, like, you might be right. Like I'm not.
right.
You're right. Like it was a hard call. Like I wasn't sure what was going to happen the next day. And I took ownership. I said, I'm the head of school, and ultimately it's my responsibility. And I
Yep,
wasn't
I did
sure.
the
And like,
exact same thing. I
yeah,
did the exact
and
same
that
thing. And I
resonates
think
with
as
people.
parents, like you're not gonna lose the family. The
Right,
Shabbos table is not gonna turn
right,
into a
right.
picnic in a park.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
adrabah. Yeah, it has to be done b'chachma, but Baruch Hashem. All right.
All right. Now I'll ask you a question about Schonfeld. Okay. My 10th grade son seems to be floating in his current Mesivta. He's doing okay, but not thriving or growing in the way I had hoped. I understand that no yeshiva is perfect, and finding the right fit often is about the right shidduch between the school and the child. Should we consider looking for a new Mesivta next year to help him maximize his potential, Or is it better to avoid the risk if he's managing well enough? Wow, that's a hard one, especially if
So
you don't know the situation.
yeah, so you can't answer, you can't attempt to answer the question about any bacher without knowing
Right.
everything, and it's being that we know nothing. So I'm going to obviously just speak generally. I taught 10th grade for 5 years. I was the Bekias Rabbi Misifta of Clifton, where my son is now a 10th grader. This is not my son. My son, Kanan Hara, is Kanaking, Blian Hara. I once heard from Reb Shimon Russell that the two hardest grades to teach are 7th grade and 10th grade. Just agav orche. Those are the grades of the biggest change in identity of a person. 7th grade, there's a hormonal change, and everyone's different, but 7th grade is the big year of change. And then 9th grade, you're a freshie again. You're a little rookie, so you're happy you're a little kid. And 10th grade, you want to know, why can't I stay out till 1? Why can't I drive? Why can't I drink? Why? I'm an adult. Why? 11th grade is the year where you start maturing. So 10th grade is a hard year. Fine. That being said, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have as parents, as mechanchim, elementary school, I think it's even harder, is we just try to fix everything in one day. If the kid is in 7th grade and he's not thriving, we call on a crisis team. And there are kids that will flower and explode in 6th and 7th grade and they become Mitsuyanim. There are kids that 8th grade, when the beginning start for high school, they turn on a switch and they keep going. There are kids that 10th. And then, as we all know, there are kids that it's first Yeshivish Medrash. Now, some of them go to Eretz Yisrael, some of them don't. Everyone has their own trajectory. The basic premise is, I know that, Garfield, this is your big mantra, it's on my desk here, is that assuming that the child comes from a healthy home and that the child is, by and large, a healthy, well-adjusted child, he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna figure it out. What it means, not everyone's gonna become Rabbi Akiva Eger. Maybe in Texas they will, but not everyone is gonna become Rabbi Akiva Eger. But just your child's in 10th grade and he's not thriving. Whenever a parent says it to me, I say back, yet. It's not, again, I'm not answering what this parent should do. I'm not this guy. I have no idea what this kid is or what, who, what, where, when, and why. But the mashal I once heard from my uncle Avi Fishoff, who deals with a whole different world of chinuch. But the mashal, nevertheless, is spectacular. And that is, if you pass by a shack and there's no running water and the bathroom doesn't work and there's no heat and there's holes in the wall, the person says, like, that is the most dilapidated, horrible, disgusting place. And then you look at it and you realize, oh, there's a sign and it says under construction. And it just became this most glorious future. In the future, this is going to be this gorgeous mansion. Our kids are under construction. We all are, hopefully. But especially teenagers, they're under construction. And we have a kid that has a bad week, a bad 2 weeks. He misses a shachris in yeshiva or whatever it is. And we go into crisis mode. Rabbi Yitzvei used to tell his talmidim, the job of a Rebbe is nit kaila machen. Just don't ruin them. Don't ruin them. Let them on their own, they'll figure it out. Again, I know I'm being incredibly simplistic, but I
I guess, how do you know when you need to? So you're saying generally, don't make a change. Generally,
how do you know? Is he going to yeshiva every day? Is he, right? Listen, if your son is miserable, he'll tell you. You'll know. I know plenty of 10th graders that are thriving. I also know plenty of 10th graders that are, still finding themselves. You'll know, chas v'shalom, if your son is really, really struggling. And your son is in yeshiva, he's not doing great. Maybe listen, every year is the new Rebbe, and not everyone figures it out in 9th and 10th grade. Not everyone wakes up in 11th. I'm not telling you what to do. To me, it's just take a deep breath and it's gonna be okay. And by the way, the longer you can avoid the child falling apart, the better chance it is that he'll be okay. As long as he doesn't have a catastrophic, 6 weeks, and we don't have to. We know the details of what catastrophic means, and you'll see it. Then he'll figure it out. I promise you, kids figure it out. It might not be in 12th grade. He might struggle through high school. Maybe one of those kids, as they say, what's the nusach? He wasn't on fire in high school. Okay. And then he goes to Eretz Yisrael, or he goes to a different yeshiva in America. I mean, we know how many hundreds of kids do you know like that? And it was nothing. They were just, kacha, like, you see your neighbor whose son is learning all night, and you see your neighbors, and your kid davens at the 9:30 on Shabbos. I'm not saying to ignore your son.
Mm.
I'm saying to
Don't panic.
embrace the journey. And the worst thing you can do to your son is to let him know that he's frustrating you and that he's disappointing you and that you don't get him and that he's not as I once had a 10th grade parent say to me, this type of boy, mom is this type of boy. And I said to the father, does he know that you love him? And the father's reaction, ready for this, was the following. Yeah, but listen, it's not easy. His older brother's a Mitzuyan. I shouldn't be laughing. Horrible. Imagine. His older brother's a Mitzuyan. It's not easy. Like,
Wow.
dude. So then he doesn't know that you love him. And his wife turns to him and she says, oh, come on. He knows that whenever you say you love him, you don't really mean it. Like straight.
Wow.
And he says to me, what do you mean? I told him last week, Yankee, that if I was ever stuck in an island by myself, I would pick you in the family. So I said, you know what Yankee's thinking? He's thinking, Ta, you're never going to get stuck on an island your whole life. So if that's all you need me for, I'm not telling parents to just let your child do whatever he wants. I'm saying that it takes time, and buckle up. Buckle up.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to the spotlight.
No, 1 second. I just finished 6 minutes straight of having you being quiet, and that's it. You are 9th grade Rebbe for years in Atlanta. You are a life coach.
One very important thing. Don't forget camp. Camp could have a huge impact on a child like this, where they don't thrive during the day, during the year, but when they go to camp, like maybe Camp Aish, for example, they could really thrive. How's that for a comment? Do you like that one?
I get a phone call this week from someone that says to me, Rabbi Schonfeld, do you think Rabbi Garfield is open to any criticism? So he said he knows you. He knows you a little bit from back in the day.
Okay.
I said, what's the criticism? Why does he have to be so snarky to you sometimes? So I said, call him. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So now we're going to get to the spotlight question, a very, very relevant and important topic. And here is the question. I feel like I need an education or maybe an intervention. My children are Baruch Hashem healthy and productive, but get anxious whenever a challenge arises. It could be a test or a sleepover or a friend that wasn't expected. Whatever I try doesn't work. So I ask you, what are the top 2 mistakes that parents make daily with anxious children? Can you give me some good strategies on how to deal with an anxious child at home? Wow.
So this might be the question of, or the challenge maybe, of our generation, but definitely the last 4 years, COVID did not make anything lighter. And I do, before we bring on our guest, I think we have to split it up into 2 separate categories, and that is intervention, medication, therapy, right? That is one area, and of course there's room for that. But I think for a majority of parents and rebbeim and teachers, it's not, of course it's not that heavy. There are kids that they get nervous. And if we don't realize and figure out how to deal with a kid that has just typical, normal, run-of-the-mill anxiety and nervousness, then we have to learn their language. I had a kid in my yeshiva a few weeks ago that the parents called me that, he had a test and refused to come to school. Or he didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. Not a kid that was a well-adjusted kid, and they just wanted to know, what do I do with that? How do I, because everything I say to him just gets him more anxious and more nervous. So I think this is something that we all can relate to in our own lives and our children's lives. And as opposed to me giving my novice, uneducated answer, I think that it's probably best that we bring in someone who literally spends most of her waking hours doing this. And I have to do a disclaimer. I think it might be the second time that we've had a relative of mine on. So we do a disclaimer, and that is, it is our pleasure to welcome to the Learning Curve podcast, Mrs. Shiffy Lieberman. She happens to be my wife's sister, so she's my sister-in-law. But besides that, she has other wonderful qualities, and that is that Mrs. Lieberman is a licensed marriage family therapist, and she has created a very popular virtual courses for parents, educators, and therapists called Anxiety Made Simple and Social Skills Made Simple, that really, in a humorous way in a clear way to try to literally answer this question, and has received tremendous response and has become very popular. She also, another fascinating, maybe a deep dive for a different podcast, but she's created a guide for parents and educators based on the work of the Child Development of Yale University called A Close Look at Ages 1 to 14, the different ways in kids in which they behave and the ways to talk to them at different ages. All of these are available either on Amazon or you could download it on her website, ShiffyLieberman.com. It is our pleasure to welcome Mrs. Shiffy Lieberman to the podcast. Welcome aboard. So this is literally your area.
I'd like to take a step back, if I will, and tell us how you got into this field, like mental health in general and specifically as it relates to anxiety.
So I talk about this a lot, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about this. But about 20 years ago, as I was entering the field of mental health, and I could not figure out if I should go for social work, mental health counseling, all the different degrees, I ended up finding, after many tries, finding a family therapy degree, licensed marriage and family therapist in Seton Hall University. And I ended up doing my internship actually at JFS, Jewish Family Service in Clifton, where now I'm on the board of directors. So it's an agency very close to my heart and to my home. And I started working, they placed me at Yeshiva Katana Passaic 18 years ago. And so I was
Oh, wow.
a lot of my time I was spending during the day at Yeshiva Katana Passaic, and I was taking on cases at Jewish Family Service at night, and I was noticing the pattern where it came to anxiety, which is a pattern that's very well known, anxious parents, anxious children, and I realized how deeply anxiety really runs in families and how if we're only dealing with it in school, we're not actually helping the problem and dealing with the parents at the agency, it just gave me tremendous insight to how to help their children in the school setting. So it became just a passion of mine, really, to try to help anxiety from a family therapy perspective.
Both you saw the kids in the morning and then the
Aha.
parents at night. And
It's
you're
like
like,
visiting
aha.
day. Yeah.
And do you have a certain orientation or you went back to school or you studied a
Mhm.
certain methodology? I don't know the anxiety so well, but I assume that there's different schools of thought on how to
It
deal with it. Do
happens to
you
be that
have
my
one that
orientation
you
in family therapy is really very much based on emotion focused therapy, which Sue Johnson's approach. Over the years, it's been combined with IFS, which I'm sure you've heard about. Anxiety, if you ask me like what I could scream from the rooftops, it's that anxiety is so easily treated. One of my supervisors once said it's more easily treated than the common cold. There's so much information and so much research about it that it's not even like many different modalities. It's very clear cut really how to deal with it if we can catch it at a more mild or moderate state. So in terms of anxiety, it's tremendous amount of experience. And obviously I've learned from my mentors and my supervisors. And we've learned different ways of dealing with it, but there's also so many patterns that just repeat itself that it becomes very clear once you see it all day, every day.
would you say that the numbers of cases anxiety is going up? And I know people say that, but I'm just, I guess, what your perspective is, and if you attribute it to something.
It's a question that we get all the time, and it's a similar question, like, are there more divorces nowadays than there were years ago? Obviously, there are so many more marriages than there were years ago. So so the percentage actually go up? Anxiety is there more anxiety today, or is there just more awareness today? Like, do we know the words? Do we understand what we're seeing? Definitely because of the internet, anxiety has gone up. That for sure. I don't think I honestly think about like the children in the world during the Holocaust. Like, I don't think that they were privy to what our children were privy with October 7th. I don't think they saw any of that. They couldn't have, right? So anxiety, we're definitely more anxious, but we also, in a way, have so many treatment plans and so many treatment options that in a way it's less because we know how to deal with it better. So it's a question that a lot of people speak about all the time, and yes and no, I guess.
So let's deal with a simple scenario in which a kid has a report due or a test, a fourth to sixth grade boy or girl, and it's the night before, and he's just so nervous, or she's just so nervous that the teacher, I'm not ready, the teacher's, I'm not going to do well, it was going to make fun of me, and I'm crying, I'm not going to school tomorrow, I can't do it, right? Which happens in every household in America. And so, first of all, I mean, maybe we should take a step back in translating anxiety. Is that
First
anxiety?
of all, let's take a step back. What is anxiety? What is anxiety? And the reason why we're starting with this question is because your very question asks that. Most people really believe that anxiety is excessive worry, is part of the worry family, which it is. It has a worry quality to it. But really, what the anxiety really is coming from is an inability to handle any type of uncertainty, a need to want to control. It's persistent, redundant, repetitive thoughts of just not being able to like lean into the uncertainty of the matter. What if this? What if that? What if my teacher won't like it? What if I don't do well? What if I don't answer the question correctly? That quality is so much more typical and so much more patterned than the just the worry. The worry in that situation, he's worried about the report, but that's not how we treat anxiety, and that's not really what anxiety is. It's the pattern of just not being able to handle any bit of uncertainty. That's what we need to focus on.
So you're saying it's not something that would express itself in isolation of a report. It's a lifestyle or a mindset.
Yes, except that someone can have anxiety in a specific situation.
Aren't there people that are have just full blown anxiety when it comes to tests or public speaking? Right, that's anxiety. Someone who's stage fright has anxiety, but it's just stage fright. Afraid of dogs. Let's say someone's afraid of dogs.
That's my brother-in-law making fun of me right there. And that's a phobia, and that's different than anxiety.
Don't be snarky.
Phobia is different than anxiety. I talk about that all the time. Yes, you can also have anxiety without having an anxiety disorder, which people don't understand. People you can in order for it to qualify for an actual anxiety disorder, it needs to really, really affect your life, and it has to disrupt your life. It has to be persistent and there for 6 months, and even if you're trying to treat it, it only gets worse and not gets better. In order to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, there has to be criteria. I'm saying we go according to the DSM and whether or not you're a fan of the DSM or not, but it's not just because someone has anxiety about something, do they have an anxiety disorder, which of course is also, very misunderstood today. People just don't understand that.
Just to go back to my Garfield question, will it show up everywhere if a person that struggles with
So
uncertainty?
often it does. Often it's very patterned and redundant. And then sometimes people have their anxiety about certain situations, whether it's weather related or locking the doors at night, or they have anxiety when it comes to fires, and that's where also anxiety has different families to it. Also, there can be an OCD quality, just an obsessive compulsive thought. It can be like let's say somebody called me about a fourth grader, also very, very worried about going for a sleepover. And we got through it and we understood it. And with the techniques that I'm sure that we'll discuss in a few minutes, it was a successful sleepover and they felt great. And I said to the mother, this pattern is going to come back up before sleepaway camp, before she gets married, because if you understand the anxious brain, then you understand that some people are just wired for those what if questions. And once we understand the process of anxiety, then we can apply it to every situation. So there are some people, who are super anxious, but they'll go skiing without a helmet. And people are like, it doesn't even make sense. Of course it makes sense because that's not their brain is not anxious about that type of thing. So there are definitely patterns and it's unique to every person. But when we take a step back and we look at anxiety in general, it's really, if you understand the process of anxiety, then everything else becomes content. Everything else. That's why parents make this
Just want
mistake.
to
What?
clarify something. You had said before that anxiety could be treated if handled properly and identified, but then it sounds like it's something that someone has for the rest of their life. So when you say treated, you don't mean like resolved that they don't have that issue. I guess you mean there are techniques that enable an anxious person to live with the
Yeah,
anxiety. Is
I
that right?
believe that. I think that anxiety can be managed.
But you never get rid of it. It's not like
Yes, I know, but the once you have so much practice and the thought pattern comes and and the person starts telling themselves, "Oh, that's my what if brain going on," or "That's my anxiety." And what do I need to tell? I need to be able to lean into the uncertainty. I need to be able to give myself a little bit of space. I need to be able to calm myself down. Then the process becomes quicker. And yes, whether it's managed or it's treated, it depends on the severity of the of of the person, but a lot of people will say that it's managed, and that's why when they come back 5 years later with a different question, and they'll feel like it's such a setback. And I thought this was like fifth grade behavior, and now I'm in 10th grade, and I'm still struggling, and I'm so upset at myself. And we remind them that's okay. That's how the brain is wired.
Or a correlation between anxiety and self confidence? Because one could imagine that if I'm super self confident, then I won't have the one what ifs. I'll probably think I'll do well on the test. I'll probably, not be afraid to sing in the choir or to have the sleepover because I'm pretty confident that the kids are not going to make fun of me in my pajamas. Is there a relation?
It's a great question. I can't say that I know the answer, perfectly because it is a very good question. From my experience, it's not like that. You see the most confident children who are so successful in every area have an anxiety creep up on them that would no one would even know. Like it's just and they come home at night whether it's a social anxiety or it's a panic attack that just comes on, without notice, or it's an OCD thought. And I don't think no, I don't think that it has to do with self-confidence. I do think that the self-confidence gives them fuel to be able to manage what they're dealing with and to be able to say like I'm a normal, healthy, great person despite this, because very often the anxiety and someone who's struggling with anxiety ends up thinking that they're crazy. Like, they really end up they're like, "What's wrong with me? Like, why? Like, the whole class is going on a sleepover. Like, why am I like this?" They feel like a crazy person, so when you have the self-confidence to balance that out, it helps. But you see the most confident person struggling with anxiety.
So what would you say is the profile of an anxious child? Like, what would symptoms look like, and how could a person tell if he has unhealthy amount of anxiety in their
So
children?
people love the answer to this question because I really always say when parents call me and they're like so worried, oh my gosh, maybe the parents have, the child has anxiety. I always say, "Is your child smart?" And you're like, "Yeah, they kind of are smart." I say, "Well, it's very highly associated with the smart. It's very
Yeah.
it, re-
Is it
it
really?
really is.
Wow.
Oh, for sure. It's because when you tell a child of low intelligence, let's just say, that COVID's coming or what's going on, they're like, okay, whatever, they're flippant. If someone who's extremely bright and can really think things through, they are panicked and they are rightfully panicked. Like they really it takes a certain amount of intellect and a certain amount of brain power actually to
I know someone during COVID want to try to buy a cow.
exactly. First of all, anxious people, I don't want to say anxious people, a lot of people who suffer with anxiety loved COVID. A lot of my clients were like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Like they wish because they wish everybody would walk around with gloves and masks and especially the ones that are dirt or germ, anxious about that. They love that. Like they were finally like, finally the world understands what we live with. They had a much easier time in general with COVID than the rest of the world that didn't even understand how to deal or tolerate their anxiety. So it's closely associated with the very bright who can think through consequences. Like really, when never when something happens in life to someone who has anxiety to begin with, and then there's an illness in the family or there's a divorce in the family, and this one child just can't tolerate it. It's because they completely understand and they've gone through because this is what they do. They can't handle they have a need for control. They can't handle doubt. So they end up in order to try to get more power, they go through every single situation in their heads to try to make sense of it or try to gain control. So of course, when you're laying at night and you're thinking about all the different scenarios, like how could you not be anxious about that? Whereas someone else, a different kid is just, more happy go lucky. It's just like whatever, like it'll be fine. So it's definitely very highly associated with the bright and the creative. And I also find that with children, when children are told that, they really, they're proud of it. They become proud of their anxiety. They love it.
Interesting. All right. And so how do you know if a child needs like an intervention? Like what's the difference when a parent should just say, whatever, just leave it, move on, or they should really reach out for help?
So if there's something that I can scream from the rooftops, it's manage the anxiety when the anxiety is mild. Because it's a process. So if we understand, if we see that a child is not able to take a reasonable risk, that's what we say. We ask the child, look to your right, look to your left. Are most people in your culture, are most people in your age group able to do this thing and you can't? It's debilitating and it's not allowing you to function. That can be that your anxiety is holding you back. So we ask them, can they take a reasonable risk? If they're not able to take a reasonable risk, or if the parent is tending to the anxiety, the parent stopped going to weddings at night because the child can't be home at night. The parent is accommodating their anxiety. You have a 14-year-old still sleeping in the parent's room because they can't. If we find ourselves understanding and accommodating the anxiety and the child is not able to take a reasonable risk, and it becomes like at 8 years old, they don't really want to be home alone with the babysitter. But At 12 years old, that's already not age appropriate. So, like, is the anxiety age appropriate? At these points, a parent has to stop and tell themselves that it really is inhibiting their functioning. And once the parent learns how to speak differently, and once the child understands what they need to do, then it's practice. People are, the question is like, what is it too early? I always say it's never too early, it's never too late. If a child at 4 understands for the first day before kindergarten, this is hard and this feels uncomfortable, but I can do this because I am strong and because I know that I can do this. I mean, that's the most powerful statement someone can have for the rest of their life. That's what you want.
So without saying everything, because then if you just say everything now, then no one's gonna buy your course. Give the top 2 tricks of the trade for a parent that has a child with they're all to me this similar families. So that's not don't pick one. No, sleepover or a test. Scared of the first day of school. What is the language that parents should learn, or the tools that parents should use in trying to manage a mild anxiety before it takes over the child's life?
I was waiting for you to ask this question. It's my favorite question. What's the biggest mistake that parents make? And it really is providing reassurance. And it's providing reassurance. Reassurance is called reassurance because it is reassuring. And there's no problem with reassuring a child when they need the reassurance. And the reason
Mhm.
why parents reassure their children is because it's reassuring in the moment. It helps in the short term when the night before school and the child is it's 10 o'clock at night and the child's in 3rd grade and the child's like, I don't know if I'm gonna like my new class. I don't know if I'm gonna like my Rebbe. I don't know if I'm gonna like my teacher. What if I don't like my seat? And all of these what if questions that the what if brain is firing and just on. And the parent just says, I'm sure it's gonna be good. It's gonna be great. You're gonna love your teacher. You're gonna love your class. And the
Uh,
reason why they're reassuring them is honestly just to stop them from asking questions. The main reason why people reassure their children is because we want them to stop. We want them to stop asking these questions. We can't handle these what if.
It's trying to shut them up is what it's trying to do.
Yeah, that's definitely I mean,
Or get over it. Get
move
over
on. I
it,
have
really,
other
right?
kids to tend to. I wanna
Right.
go to sleep. It's 10 o'clock at night. It's gonna be fine. It will be fine. There's not gonna be fire.
Is it just doesn't work or it backfires?
It backfires. I'll tell you
Why?
why it backfires. Because what happens, I had a parent who the child was afraid of rain. And the mother called me like 3 times, like, between 8:20 and 8:25, "Shiva, you're gonna be in school today. You're gonna be in school today. It's supposed to rain." And I told my daughter that if it rains, she should find you and you'll call me and I'll come pick her up. So I walked her through, and the kid was like getting out of carpool to go to, and you could say it's all about carpool. And the kid was getting out of carpool to go to school. And afterwards, I called her back and I said, let's just explain. Let's just unpack what happened. Now your child A had an anxiety about rain. Now she's gonna have an anxiety that she's not gonna be able to find me when it starts raining. And she's gonna have an anxiety that you're not gonna pick up your phone. And we've created so many anxieties for her because it's not about the rain. It's about the uncertainty. It's about the doubt. So we just created so many more areas for her that to be uncertain. So when now I said I'm only going to be in school for a few hours today. I don't know if the exact time that it's going to rain, I'm going to be there.
Right.
So but now she's going to spend the whole day trying to find me just to make sure that I'm there when it rains. What happens in those situations is that what happens if it rains, the child couldn't find me, or the child could find me. I call her and she says, I'm not there. We've created a lot of distrust. We've created a lot, and then the next time it happens and the parent wants to reassure the child again, the child is not going to go for that because it's not what it's about. It's not about just answering the question. It's about being able to handle, the uncertainty. Is it gonna rain when I'm in school? Is it gonna, so really the appropriate response at that point is to lean in and to say, this feels so uncomfortable for you. You don't know what time the rain is gonna start. We wish we were weathermen. We're not weathermen. We can't we know it's supposed to start around 2, 3, we understand that. You got this. You're strong enough to handle this. You can, and at that point, I mean, I do teach 18 different techniques that we can do at that time, whether it's positively reinforce them for their behavior, whether we gradual expose them to rain. A lot of the treatments that we do for anxiety are not in that anxious moment. So parents will call me always like at 8:22 when the kid is coming out of the class. I always say, like, now, like, now you wanna reassure them, reassure them. Like, that's the only thing you have. It's the only thing you've got. It's the only tool that's in your toolbox. But that's it causes a tremendous amount of mistrust and, a lot of frustration on both ends because the parent is just like, "Get out of my car. I need to go." And the kid is like, "Well, like, you left me stranded. Like, I'm petrified of rain, and now what am I supposed to do? Like, I don't have a good plan in place." And they end up a lot of times parents, like, they really do lose trust. Your Rebbe is gonna be so nice. You're gonna do amazing on the math test. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna present in front of the class. I'm sure you're not gonna be nervous at all. We give our children such a dishonest amount of reassurance that it actually does backfire in many different ways. And I wanna tell you, I got a lot of feedback from children later on because 'cause I'm already been doing this for so long that I have clients that have come to me past elementary school. They come back now early married, and they've remembered our conversations, and they'll say to me, my mother told me she'll be home. My mother told I was very anxious about my mother not being home from school. She always told me in the morning she'll be home. But honestly, she's a late person and I can't trust anyone anymore. I can't trust. She was never home. She should have just told me she's not going to be home. But if she knew, if she told me she wasn't going to be home, that I wouldn't leave to school in the morning. So she lied because she wanted to get me out. Like so, it creates a lot of distrust and a lot of tension.
So reassurance is one big mistake. One more mistake is
Telling them not to worry. Because when you tell them not to worry, I've had this also, like these 5-year-olds, and they're like, "Mom, the baby's gonna choke, the baby's gonna choke." What does the mother say? Like, picture the mother with, like, all disheveled and, like, just barely managing. "Don't worry, I got this. You don't have to worry about the baby's choking," while she's not even looking. So what's going on? The child is now like, "Shoot, my mother's not taking the choking seriously. I'm petrified that my baby's gonna choke. Now I'm not taking off my eyes off the child, off the baby." Now we've just empowered the anxiety. We just put the anxiety on steroids. When we tell the child not to worry in that tone and in that dismissive way, what we're doing is we're strengthening the anxiety, and parents are trying so hard to be helpful. Like, I got this. It's not your responsibility. The baby is my responsibility. Don't worry. But what the child is doing is taking on so much more of the responsibility, and it tends to backfire.
imagine there are mothers and fathers right now, maybe in their car or, going for a power walk that are about to drive into a tree because they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is literally me every day. That don't worry, you're gonna do great. Nothing is gonna happen. It's not dangerous. Don't worry, don't worry. I'm gonna reassure, reassure." So now that we've told all normal parents that they are
Cool.
destroying their children's anxiety lives and are causing their anxious children to become even more anxious, you have to give them the medication. I don't mean physical medication. I mean, you have to give them the solution. So what should they do? Otherwise, right now, you've just destroyed the self-confidence and you've caused a lot of anxious parents.
Okay. That's a great question. And then we come to the treatment. So at this point, we're going from mild, let's say, to moderate, and the parents are getting nervous. The parents are like, "Oh my gosh, my child is not going to be able to go to sleepaway camp. My child," of course, very often the parent is anxious themselves, so they're already like, "My child is not going to go to seminary. My child, like, how is my child going to get married?" Which, by the way, so often one of the biggest feedbacks that I get from people who buy Anxiety Made Simple is this comic relief. Like, I bought it to help my child, but I did not realize how much I needed it for myself. Like, I've spent my whole life being anxious, not even understanding what anxiety is. I've relied on other people. I've called my husband and I said, before I left, to do something, and I need my husband's reassurance, and then I hang up the phone, even angrier at my husband, but I don't even understand why, because I called them for the reassurance, but then when they gave me the reassurance, it didn't help. So most of the feedback is like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I never knew this." And to me, I feel like education and information is so cheap nowadays. There are so many books. Forget Anxiety Made Simple, even though you shouldn't forget about it. You should buy it. But there's books. There's Lynn Lyons has a book, Anxious Children, Anxious Kids, What to Do When You Worry Too Much, Dawn Eubner's book for children. There are so many books, and like I said, we can help manage anxiety easier than the common cold because it's all patterns and it's all redundant. And any therapist has seen this 1,000 times before. This is not new. So if the parent is actually like, "Oh my gosh, help me!" Like, now what? The question is, does the child need therapy? And of course, does the child need medication? And my belief system is that as long as the relationship between the parent and the child is still strong and there is still trust, then know that it is preferable for the parent to treat the child themselves.
So how do they treat it?
Okay, so never in the moment. Never in the moment. In the moment, you just have to just go with the flow because once the child I happen to be a little bit of a brain person, but once the child is in the anxious mode of the brain, they don't have access to their
They
body.
call this the lizard brain, right?
Yeah, they call yes, exactly. So what happens is that parents wait for their child to be so anxious, and then they get worried that the child's not gonna go to school or whatever, and they start, like, screaming till they're blue in the face, "Just go already, like, I can't," like, so nothing in the moment, you just have to breathe through it, and honestly, like, my advice is give empathy for the experience that they're experiencing. It's a very uncomfortable feeling to be so uncertain. It's a very, very uncomfortable feeling for the child. So in the moment, just be there for them, be so careful not to shame them about their anxiety, because what happens, and it's my biggest fear, is that when children they start realizing that they're sounding like they're a bit crazy, and they stop speaking up as they get older, because just to be told that they're going to be fine. So I should tell my parents that I'm worried, they're going to tell me that I'm fine, and I should not be worried. So they
Hmm.
start holding it in, and that causes a whole bunch of other problems.
Wow. What's the role of medication? Is that important? What percentage of kids respond to it?
I'm not a psychiatrist. I feel very strongly that I have to stay in my lane, but I do see, just from my, many years of experience, that once it hits a certain severity, I'm such a believer in medication. I have seen for adults and of children, and I have letters. What I've done is I started collecting letters from adults who started medication at a later time in life, and thinking like, where was this all my life? Like, I've literally been suffering. I've been suffering, and no one told me I need medication. So I started collecting testimonials and letters from people, just as a way of giving other people chizuk when they start medication.
Hmm.
Like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if you need medication. Like, there's so many different reasons for people to need medication. Like,
Is there any downside to trying medication?
the biggest downside is that for some people, it's not the first one and the first dose is not, doesn't always work. And, and then some people say that there's side effects, but overall, I'm a huge believer in medication. I'm just, with severe anxiety, with mild anxiety, I'm a believer in just getting the information, understanding how to calm ourselves down. The whole treatment, which we didn't even discuss different treatment, is to calm ourselves down from that anxious brain, so that we're able to use our anxious brain.
Ms. Lieberman, I'm wondering with regard to medication that seems to be so helpful, I'm just curious at what age do you say that? Like, we have kids who are in preschool or in first grade who are already experiencing quite significant anxiety. Would you say that that should be part of the intervention right away? Or is there like an age where you feel that that becomes a viable option?
I really think it's a question for the psychiatrist. It has to do with what else they're experiencing. It has to do with how severe the anxiety runs in the family. Let's say they have 8 other siblings already on anti-anxiety medication. Like, maybe it's better to start it earlier so that they don't have to go through a few years of school. Or, on the flip side, maybe they're medicating them too early because they just assume that they're going to need medication, but it's not really true. So a very good psychiatric assessment is really needed, and getting a full picture. Somebody called me. She was sure her child had anxiety. She was sure, and I don't even know. Maybe she'll listen to this. And she said the child had lost a tremendous amount of weight from anxiety, and everything that they were saying. But it just, the story didn't add up. And I had seen this before, and I said I really needed to go, before you do anything. I needed to go get a medical exam, and turned out the child had diabetes. So, like, there's a lot of different. A lot of symptoms can look the same, but you really need like a very good psychiatric or some type of assessment.
But give us your top three. The top three things, right? Like with a drum roll, the top three things that a parent can do besides nothing in the moment. The top three things that a parent can do to help a child gain the skills to manage their anxiety is
Okay, so let's assume it's a slightly younger child, because this intervention works great, but really externalizing the anxiety is major. Being able to understand that my anxiety is separate from me, and we can externalize it, which is what we call, is so empowering for the child. Meaning, I can talk to it, I can name it, sometimes people call it like Mr. Froggy. I can put it away for later. I can keep it in a box. You can shelve it for later. You really can, and very often children do that. They say, look, they really want to go to the birthday party. I'm going to put it in this box, keep it here. And they come back and they can talk back to it later. But externalizing is a really good tool that children and adults should be able to use. We call it the 5 question rule, or the 5 minute rule. If a child is acting incessant, asking incessant amounts of questions, or just we can say to them, Give me your 5 best questions. Like, are we gonna be on time for the wedding? How do we know that there's not gonna be traffic? All of these, give me it seems to me like your anxious brain is in full blown right now. Let's put a boundary on this. Ask me 5 questions.
Why does that help?
'Cause the anxiety has no boundaries. It's just an unending amount of questions. So once we're limiting it right away, there's a boundary to it, and then hopefully they can go back into their more logical brain and say like, "Oh my God, I'm making my mother crazy." Like I'm literally I asked my mother 10 times this morning if she's gonna be home when I come home from school. Like I'm making her crazy. And once we get to that place, being able to calm ourselves down, breathing is huge. You know what hyperventilating is? When I found it, when I learned this years ago, I was like, "Oh, cool. Hyperventilating is hyperventilating." It's like they're breathing so fast because they think that they're in danger. So slowing down the breathing automatically tells the brain, "I'm not in danger. I'm fine. Like I got this. I'm cool, calm, and collected. I'm in control." Walking through worst case scenario is a very helpful tool for children. What to do if there's a fire in school. So we go through that. The parent and the child goes through that. What to do? What are you going to do? I'm going to run to my teacher. What if you can't find your teacher? I'm going to run to the principal. We put a plan in place that what happens is it works for 2 reasons. One, it's an actual, what if you come home and I'm not home from school? You're going to run to the neighbor. What if the neighbor's not home? We'll go to that neighbor. What happens is a very interesting, fascinating reason why it works. But it's an actual safety plan, so they feel it gives them a lot more of control. But also, once we experience something like in a real way, right away they're much more less anxious about it because they feel like, I got this. Let me just talk it through.
Doing mental practice. You're going through it mentally in your head, like before a game. You practice. I think great Michael Jordan said that before every single game, he would picture himself hitting like the game-winning shot in the fourth quarter. So therefore, by the time he got there, he already had done it.
Love that. Last one that verbatim can use and parents can use in the classroom when you're seeing an anxious child, it's a grounding technique. But let's say someone's very anxious, either there's going to be a sub or for a test, they can look around the room and it's a grounding to find all the red, everything red in the room. Look for one color. There's a scientific reason, but it actually calms down the body and it's sort of,
Say it again. The Rebbe tells the kid, Yankel, look around the room and find everything that's blue.
yeah. Count the blues, count the reds, it almost like shifts the focus.
Is that Kabbalah?
It's somatic. It's somatic
It creates organization and certainty. Is that what it is?
and calm. But I'm not even 100% sure why, but it does I mean, it's very effective and it's something that the kids.
It's certainly distracting from obsessive thoughts because you're not able to obsess in those thoughts if you're busy counting the blues.
You could count right. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Lieberman. And once again, we'll give the shout out to the course if there's any left. But I think the way I think internet works is I don't think they right. You don't sell out if you could just download it. But it's anxiety made simple, and what's the other one called? Social
Skills made simple.
School Made Simple at shiffylieberman.com. And thank you once again for joining us and continued hatzlacha in helping people of the world.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So, Rabbi Garfield, that was fascinating. I have Nagias, right, in a family member, and I've relied on Mrs. Lieberman heavily in my own parenting skills.
Wow.
So I guess I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah.
And as parents and as educators, as she kept pointing out, we'd sometimes just we give the kids the wrong food and the wrong medication and the wrong answer.
You're right.
The kid's hungry and you give the kid a pencil. And you're like, how come it's not calming you down, right? So the kid is anxious and you tell the kid not to worry or, in the moment, all of these things, insightful. And I hope, listen, the goal of this podcast is that all of us, starting with the two of us, should become better parents, better Rebbeim, better Manalim.
Right.
And I hope we're on our way.
Listen, it was very empowering because she said, I think this is one of the things she wanted to scream from the rooftops is that it's manageable. There are things to do. Don't feel, don't feel stuck. So that's a great message, important message. All right, wonderful. Well, I just wanted to mention once again, we appreciate all of our listeners who share feedback with us, sending us messages. And the website is thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com, thelearningcurve@mishpacha.com. And we look forward to your continued feedback and your ideas and continuing on this journey together. Wishing you all the best.